I am a Blompier, and the Jersey Blompiers are famous for three things: having the kind of teeth that could eat an apple through a tennis racket, sarcasm, and a thick, unblemished hairline. Just great, thick hair. Hair thicker than a prison door. No bald spots in the Blompier family. Look, here's relatively famous painter Edmond Blompier. Oh God, where's all his hair? Editor, put some hair on him. Just put some bloody hair on him. Wrestling has a number of famous family portraits decorating its illustrious halls. Easier to get your foot in the door when your dad's in the trade, right, Randy? Ted, Dog, Brian, and that's just naming a few families that didn't quite make the list. Let's have a closer look at some of the most golden dynasties in wrestling history. I'm Adam from partsFUNknown, and here are our 10 greatest wrestling families. And while you're here, make sure you're subscribed to partsFUNknown so you can become part of our family. The Wrestle Talk family. We're not a cult. I'm legally obliged to say that. Number 10, Von Erich. One of the most comprehensive and also tragic wrestling families of all time. The Von Erichs were a dominant force in territory wrestling throughout the 70s and 80s, thanks to their white-hot home Texas promotion, World Class Championship Wrestling, helmed by patriarch Fritz Von Erich. The former NWA president had several sons, most of whom became wrestlers. Kerry Von Erich, known to WWE fans as the Texas Tornado, Kevin, David, Mike, Chris, all laced up their boots, and all but one, Kevin, sadly died before their father through a series of tragic misfortunes and suicides. The family lives on through numerous third-generation talents. Ross and Marshall Von Erich are a tag team in MLW, and Lacey Von Erich was a former TNA Knockouts champion before she retired in 2010. A wide lineage marred with sadness. Number 9, Hennig. 3 different generations, 3 very different heads of hair. The Hennigs were established as a force to be reckoned with by Larry the Axe Hennig, a curly ginger gigante of a man, forming a dashing tag team with Harley Race, another curly-haired, real tough monster who could put his fist through a mountain given enough of a swing. Larry's son Kurt Hennig was, of course, Mr. Perfect. Look at that beautiful blonde hair. A name familiar from last week's list, and one of the best nearly world champions to ever grace WWE. Mr. Perfect's son, Kid Perfect, let's call him, the man who not only brought about the genesis of McGillicuddy, but also the progenitor of Axelmania, Curtis Axel. Get it? Curtis from Kurt, Axel from the Axe. It's all connected. Despite a strong-ish start for Curtis Axel as a Paul Heyman guy, including winning the IC title on Father's Day, which was a nice touch, Axel drifted around from the B team to the Social Outcasts to Rybaxel, never quite achieving his dad's success, but always being endearingly charming. Number 8, Funk. Dory Funk Sr., Dory Funk Jr., and Terry Funk, 3 men that no one can ever be quite sure are fully retired, except Dory Funk Sr. being dead, but even then you can't truly count a Funk out of a payday. Funk Sr. was a wrestler primarily in the Central and Texan territories, but his legacy was cemented by his sons Dory Jr. and Terry. Both brothers held the NWA heavyweight title, the only pair of brothers to ever do that, with Dory Jr. holding it for a stonking 4 years in the late 60s, early 70s. It's the second longest reign of all time behind Lou Thez. The Funks would tag together, most notably at WrestleMania 2, and I think it's safe to say that Terry Funk has carved out a ridiculous and wonderful 5-decades-long career, becoming one of the most iconic hardcore wrestlers of all time, bleeding all across the world, especially Japan, winning the ECW championship in their first ever pay-per-view, wrestling for WWE as Chainsaw Charlie and as himself at ECW One Night Stand 06, and of course the long-running joke that he will never, ever, ever, ever retire. Number 7, Wyndham. Man, the Wyndhams are an underrated wrestling family. 3 generations of stellar characters, starting with the patriarch Blackjack Mulligan, tagging with his partner Blackjack Lanza and capturing singles titles throughout the NWA, including tag titles with a young Ric Flair. Blackjack's son Barry Wyndham was a member of the infamous faction the Four Horsemen, seeing his star rise in WCW about the same turbulent time that Jim Herd was busy driving Ric Flair to the WWF. Blackjack's son-in-law was IRS, a reliable heat magnet during the everyone has a job era that straddled the Hulkamania and new generations. As a taxman who hectored the crowd for cheating on their taxes, he always made an impact, even if he was always second fiddle in Money Inc. to the $1 Million Man. Then, of course, IRS's sons, Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt. Maybe you've heard of them, with both sons being underutilized during their time in the Big Dub, with Bo being a fantastic character with his cloying Bo Leave persona, and yeah, Bray Wyatt. Bray f***ing Wyatt, one of the best creative minds, if not the best, of his entire generation. More love on the Wyndhams, please. Number 6, Flair. Yay for dyed blonde pricks. a cause deeply and sincerely close to my heart. There have been only two really notable flares, apologies David, but it's pretty hard to overestimate how important to wrestling they both are. Ric Flair essentially carried the NWA on his back for a time as a super draw heel champion, traveling territory to almost but not quite lose to every region's top guy. Is there anyone more synonymous with the big gold belt than Ric Flair? And of course, to further the Flair name, you've got Charlotte, who throughout her career can arguably make the claim that at certain points, she was the best and biggest female wrestler in the entire world. Despite any reservations fans might have had or still have to the Omni Flair, her matches with Asuka, Rousey, Lynch, Banks, Bayley, they all speak for themselves. She's goddamn brilliant. In industry terms, a family of two, but what a family. Number 5, Guerrero. From a small family to a much bigger one, and no less important, the Guerreros are a true lucha dynasty. The patriarch, Gory Guerrero, is credited with inventing the camel clutch, which is staggering enough by itself, but his contributions to CMLL established him as a driving force in Mexican wrestling, and that's before you reckoned with his 4 sons, all of them becoming wrestlers. Chavo, who'd sire Chavo Jr., one half of the amazing Ruthless Aggression tag team Los Guerreros. He'd also become a racially motivated golfer and woefully booked ECW champion. Mando Guerrero wrestled in the AWA, mostly teaming with his brothers, including Hector Guerrero, who debuted in WWE as the Gobbledygooker. Let us never forget that, before working more prominently in TNA. And of course, there's Eddie Guerrero, one of the most beloved and respected pro wrestlers of all time, whose daughter wrestled in NXT for a time and married Aiden English, making him an honorary member of the Very Big Clan. Number 4, Rhodes. Wrestling has more than one royal family. 3 Rhodes, each of them storied wrestlers with vast contributions to the biz and almost single-handedly keeping the peroxide industry afloat. Dusty Rhodes is widely regarded as one of the finest wrestling minds of the 1980s, an architect of the NWA, then WCW, then the guy created with shaping some of the greatest characters in NXT history, and that's before you even touch on his feuds in the 80s with Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen, his boundless charisma. Dustin Rhodes created a true monsters gallery of vivid and insane characters over his long and continuing career. Goldust, Black Rain, The Natural, Seven, all wonderfully weird. And bloody hell, how did he seem to be better and quicker in his 40s than in his 20s? And finally, Cody, who as far as I'm aware hasn't done anything of importance in professional wrestling, but given the time he'll get there. Satire, co-creator of AEW, on the run of his life right now even while he's injured, part of the best Hell in a Cell match in God knows how long, and the man most people expect to dethrone Roman Reigns at some point. It's just, yeah, the Rhodes, they truly are a wrestling royal family. Number 3, Hart. So many wrestling boys. Stu Hart not only founded Stampede Wrestling, one of the greater feeder territories of all time, not only was he widely renowned as one of the greatest technical wrestling trainers to have ever lived, but then him and Helen Hart went on to have, checks notes, bloody loads of kids who went on to be, checks notes, bloody loads of wrestlers. As a famous story goes, they had 12 kids, 8 boys who all became wrestlers, and 4 girls who all married wrestlers. The dynasty has so many bloody names in it, not all of them top guys, but, well, here are the names. Bret Hart, you've heard of him, Owen Hart, Jim Neidhart, Natalia, Davey Boy Smith, Tyson Kidd, the other Hart brothers, Bruce, Keith, Wayne, Dean, Smith, Ross, all wrestled. And that's so many wrestling boys right there. And that's before you even take into consideration a sheer tonnage of famous wrestlers who at least passed through the Hart family dungeon. Brian Pillman, Benoit, Jericho, Edge and Christian, Dynamite Kid, to name but a teeny few. The Harts have had, let's say, a bit of an impact on wrestling. Number 2, McMahon, because they just are, especially when you trace the family back 4 generations. Not only do you have Stephanie and Honorary McMahon, Triple H leading the company into a new era that's currently head and shoulders above the quality we come to expect from WWE in recent years. Not only do you have Shane, history's most death-defying thumb, who's been at the center of some of the industry's most iconic stunts. Not only do you have Vince, who created WrestleMania and a global juggernaut that not even his own very best efforts could kill, but Vince's work was built on the shoulders of giants, off Vince McMahon Sr., who made wrestling synonymous with the Garden, whose champion Bruno Sammartino was one of the most reliable draws in the industry, providing his son Vince Jr. the perfect base for his aggressive expansion. Then you move even further back to Jess McMahon, the first McMahon to promote wrestling back in the 1910s, whose storied career as a boxing promoter was instrumental in forging a permanent connection between Madison Square Garden and the name McMahon. It's hard to argue that in sheer terms of wrestling impact, there's a greater wrestling family. This is my list, and I can do what I want. Number 1, Anoa'i, because there's no other wrestling family with this many bloody world championships. The Rock, the greatest catchphrase guy in wrestling history and pretty much the biggest movie star in the world right now. Roman Reigns, who's dominated the last decade of WWE. Yokozuna, the first official Japanese WWE champion, winky face. All men at one point positioned as the top guy in their sport. Then you have Umaga, a hugely underrated monster who should have beaten John Cena for the world title, just you try and change my mind. Rikishi, the man with the ass, a tent pole of the Attitude Era. The Usos, who are in legit contention for greatest tag team of all time at this point. Nia Jax, former women's champion and advocate of her hole. Jacob Fatu, longest reigning MLW champion of all time. Naomi, former women's champion, tag team champion, battle royal winner. The Wild Samoans. There's so much star power and gold in this lineage. It's frankly insane, or I guess you could say wild. Yuck, yuck. And that's our list. What do you think is the greatest wrestling family? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and share this list around if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to partsFUNknown for more silly wrestling content. And never forget to jam that jam.